Welcome to Return to Heart. In this episode, Phil Herndon, Jeff Schulte, and Todd Wormers unpack the difference between healthy and toxic shame, how childhood abandonment shapes the stories we tell ourselves, and why God calls us back to live unashamed and loved. Let's get started.
Guys, we're back. We have told the story, kind of, not completely yet, told the story. And then Todd, you and I did a little takeoff on kind of the core identity we have called the Imago Dei, the image of God that we all bear, and what happens, like it happens to every human being. It's humanness. We experience abandonment. And now we're going to talk about this week what children naturally do, and it's really part of the fall. It's part of the curse. What children do, what humans do upon experiencing abandonment is they make up stories. And there is a adage out there, children never ask the story, what is wrong with them? Children's questions are always, what is wrong with me? And so we're kind of in that third realm, so to speak, the third circle of what we call the transformational process. So we're just going to have a conversation today about this thing that I think it was probably John Bradshaw that coined the phrase toxic shame, which means shame is a feeling that lets me know I'm limited, but when it turns toxic, my limitation means I'm bad, I'm inadequate, I'm no good, and no one could ever really love me. And so that's kind of where we're camping today. Yep. We're thinking around toxic shame.
One of the things I love about what John Bradshaw did with that term, and this has always frustrated me, is there's so many people out there talking about shame. Mm-hmm. And there's this big wide brush of anything that's shame related is somehow negative. And yet when I open up the scriptures, you got a man and a woman in the garden prior to the fall, and it says they're naked and not ashamed of themselves. Mm-hmm. There was a part of them not needing to hide, that they were not ashamed of their vulnerability. They weren't ashamed of their need for God. They weren't ashamed about what they saw with each other. Yeah. They hadn't had to go hide yet. And so in some ways you see a picture, the word's not used, but you see a picture of healthy shame, of I can be seen and I don't have to hide from you, that I'm not living in total fear of your rejection.
Yes.
And so I've never heard that many people, and Bradshaw's one of the first to do it, to say there's got to be a way to explain shame in a way that acknowledges biblically described healthy shame. Mm-hmm. But then what happens inside us that turns negative then when I become ashamed of the part of me that is needy, the part of me that has needs, the part of me that has feelings, the part of me that in some way it becomes the explanation I have for my rejection. That's what I talk about. Does that make sense when I say that? Yeah. So I know it's a little bit like we're slicing an onion here on this, but there has to be a distinction if you want to stay biblically accurate around the idea of shame, to acknowledge there is a healthy shame, and then there's a toxic shame. And the toxic shame is the internal explanation a child comes up with to deal with how they got rejected.
Yeah, and her seminal work, we've mentioned her on the other podcast. Sharon Cruz says this about shame and toxic shame. She said, kids make a mistake, but then the toxic shame, I am now the mistake I made. And that's the narrative. We become the mistakes we made, and that's not really true about us. And so I love what your term, I don't know if you coined it or not, unashamedness.
Yeah.
I love when you teach on the unashamedness of humanity. And I think, that's really what we're trying to get people back to, like that place in the garden of like they were naked and unashamed.
I was at a dinner this week with two really sharp college students, like junior, senior in college, going to law school, wanting to go to Washington, make a difference in politics, trying to impress me at this thing. They're sitting next to me, and they're, pretty hyped up, very sharp, smart young guys. And so they started asking me what I did. And I said, well, I help leaders return to heart. I was describing that a little bit. And I looked at both of them, and they said, well, give us an idea what you do. And I said, I just asked them, I said, so how would you like to be thought of as needy? And both immediately responded and said, never, never. And then I just said this. All I did, a very short conversation, but these guys were like, they almost fell out of their chairs. I said, well, that's the problem. I said, because if you have no needs, you can't be loved. Because love, by definition, moves into meet a need. I said, anyone trying to love you is trying to climb El Capitan without any handholds. I said, if you're not needy, you can't be loved. So, and if you can't be loved, we only love because we've first been loved. So now you don't love well because you haven't been loved well. I said, so you've just short-circuited every intimate relationship you've ever wanted to have just because you're ashamed of being needy.
Yeah.
So when that child comes into the world unashamed of their neediness, let's talk about this, but like then becomes aware of their neediness, not as something that's an avenue to relationship with God and each other, but actually becomes what's wrong with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is such a bastardization, distortion of how we are made. You know, the Beatitudes begin, at least the way Matthew organizes his book, the first public teaching that Jesus gives. He's got a very varied audience out with him. Some of them are super poor, some of them are Pharisees, some are powerful, some are not powerful. And he starts out, here's Jesus, he's got his audience, his voice is being amplified, and first thing he says, hey, blessed are the poor in spirit. And you know, scholars say there are three words that describe the word poor, three words in Greek, and one is, hey, you know, kind of working poor, like, man, we can't afford much. We're just making it happen. The second category are those like they're right on the edge. If one thing goes wrong, they're devastated. Then there's a third group. It's like, it doesn't matter. They are destitute, utterly without ability to make their own way. And that's the word he used to describe. So those people who are absolutely needy, who are unashamed of their neediness, and they live in such a way they recognize my hands are open because I'm a needy creature. And that goes all the way to humanness. Like, children are super good at that. We talked about that before. They're great at being needy. I need this. And then they get independent.
That's what they're best at, by the way. They drive us, parents, they wear us out.
Yeah.
But they're not ashamed of it.
That's right.
He's not even ashamed of wearing us out. I've got 6 of them. And I got grandkids now. They wear us out.
Yeah, that's right.
And they don't ever get tired of asking for help. Well, they will eventually because they'll think that's what's wrong with them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's where toxic shame, where I was headed, that's where that comes in. There does come a point in time, part of that's gaining differentiation, and I can be powerful. Yeah. I can tie my own shoes, that kind of thing. But there's also a part of that comes from that experience of abandonment, whether it's, we talked about it earlier, whether it's true abandonment or not. The experience of abandonment says, I better take care of myself because there's something deeply wrong with me. So I better do so this abandonment doesn't happen again because I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm no good. And you, Todd, you spoke really powerfully about that even in your own story, like, oh man, I've done something. We said we were going to save it for now. So this is a great time for that. Like, what was happening in this boy, this story that you told about abandonment, very powerful. Like, I mean, you so eloquently said, yeah, and the backstory behind all that is a boy in his house who made up stories about himself. So I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, we said in the last podcast, we defined abandonment as, when I needed you, you weren't there for me. And because of that, right, I'm not going to be needy anymore. Like, I need you now. You're not there for me. Now I'm going to take care of myself. And that really was the story of the rest of my journey. At the airport that afternoon, like, I'm going to have to figure all this out by myself. And I could not be needy again because I was needy in that moment. I needed a mom. I needed a dad. I needed a grandmother. I need somebody to rescue me. Like, that true place of abandonment is, I didn't have any of the resources to care for myself. 15 years old, I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have $2. I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. I could not in that moment do anything other than what was handed to me, and that was to get on a plane and head to Texas. And so, and the rest of my story was that. Like, I will take care of myself. And I won't trust anyone else to take care of me.
Even the precursor to that, I remember you, and the first time we mentioned this last episode, you told me that story. I remember just being so hit with, man, like golly. But what you said before you even got to the punchline, the airport punchline, you made a comment, as I remember it. This is a long time ago. As I remember it, you said, I was too much trouble.
Yeah.
I decided. So, talk about that. This is the fuel of toxic shame.
Yeah. Again, there was something about that moment that said, if I wasn't too much, if I wasn't too much trouble, if I had just done better, or however it played out when I was 15, then this would not be happening to me.
Yeah.
This right here, I must have done something for this to happen to me. Mm-hmm. And so then the rest of my journey was figuring out, making sure that didn't happen again. Like I was not going to be caught off guard. I was not going to be too much for people. And then yet, being the scapegoat, I tell the truth and I become too much for people. It's just this double-edged sword everywhere I walk. And so for me, that level of toxic shame was so overwhelming all the way back. And we've told the story thousands of times. That moment sitting in the lobby, again, just the whole way I even got there. I was dropped off at an airport at 30 years old with no return ticket. I wasn't told where I was going or what I was doing. I ended up in a car with a guy that literally dropped me off and walked out the door. And I just remember sitting there thinking, man, what have I done?
Yeah.
What have I done? And I knew enough. I got here because of, pornography. I had that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, man, how did I end up in rehab? How did I end up in treatment? Whatever I got to do not to be here again, I'm going to do.
Same value made on the plane. Mm-hmm. And just the progression, we talked about this last time, but like this boy's 15, he's playing baseball, he's an athlete, he's good looking, he's fun, all that stuff. And then, wait a minute, abandonment, I needed you, you're not here. And now like clockwork, here comes the story.
Yeah.
I was too much. I'm no good. Here I am again. What do I got to do to not be needy? Yeah. Because this needy thing does not work out. Mm-mm. No one stays.
But again, I remember sitting in your office at CPE and, the wizard that you are, you're asking me about my
wizard.
He is a wizard. Asking me about my biological dad. And I can remember telling you the story of how I told him I was, and you probably heard this too, Jeff. I said, man, I really work hard. I have a very, very hard work ethic from my dad. Because in a moment when I was 16, he forced me to get a job. But it was in that moment I'm like, yep, I'm going to get a job and I'm going to care for myself. I won't need anyone to ever care for me. At 16, I thought I just need a paycheck to buy shoes, to buy clothing, to buy my food. So I'm not a burden to anybody.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be burdensome to anyone. And I held on to that. Like for those, and I'll never forget your face. And I tell the story the same way every time. Like when I looked up and saw the horror on your face, and I was like, yeah, I guess what I said that's not a good story to be told. Like I really had that like badge of honor. Like I worked really hard because someone literally, and this is not figurative, my biological dad dropped me off at Kroger and told me you cannot come home until you have a job here, and drove out of the parking lot. And I was like, well, I know how not to get abandoned. I'll get a job.
And Todd, what day was that?
My birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, my 16th birthday present.
Here's the story.
And I got a birthday card in Spanish with a scribble on it. And I thought, I'm too much for people.
Yes.
So the toxic shame really is what drove me to rehab.
And look at how automatically the story started happening. No one taught you. No one said, Todd, we're going to do a class on toxic shame stories. So when you get abandoned, be sure you make up a story about your inadequacy. Mm-hmm. No one had to do that. The fall, among other things, took care of that. And I remember your face telling the story. I said, well, tell me about you and your dad. Todd said, oh, man, my dad really taught me a great work ethic. I go, oh, how'd that happen? Well, on my 16th birthday, he said, you ready for your present? And I said, yeah. And I think, oh, this is going to be great. Dad bonding with his son. He just moved there. He said, took me over to Kroger and said, all right, here's your present. Go get a job.
I literally thought he was going to. We had a canary yellow 72 Dodge Challenger in our that would have been rebuilt with a 44 Magnum engine. And I literally thought he was going to ride around the block and then hand me the keys. I literally thought that's what he was going to do. And we took instead he gave me a job.
You're bagging groceries.
Yeah, at Kroger.
And isn't it amazing how toxic shame is so powerful, so debilitating, that your brain, remember, protection first. Your brain said, oh, this is a great thing.
This is great.
Look what I'm learning about being a hard worker. And it's such a twist on the story when people hear it, like me, go, Todd, that's not a story about work ethic.
Yeah.
That's a story of a kid working really hard to cover how painful it is, that the dad was not thinking about the challenger. As a matter of fact, it wasn't relational at all. It's so much to take. And toxic shame says we got to find a way to cover this inadequacy.
Yeah, I remember sitting in grad school and they started, I must have been a second class, and they started talking about reframe. I'm like, that's my whole life. I've been reframing my whole story.
And yet sometimes, again, we're my story, but we're so covered up in our toxic shame that it becomes, it's like I always say to guys, like I say it this way, like if you're born on Mars, high heat, no water, and not much color is normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're born on Mars.
That's right.
But a lot of us were born into Mars. In that story, for example, that we don't know we're made for somewhere closer to the equator, with changing seasons potentially, and some green and some water. And I know for me, even in the survival, the toxic shame is a survival mechanism to deal with what do I do with the fact that someone doesn't just love me for who I am.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then sometimes it get masked over. Like I know my story for me, what I see as perfectionism, drivenness, I'm not going to fail, fear of failure, which is underneath that as well. Workaholism, which, by the way, everyone else loves except my family. Yeah. Everyone benefits from my workaholism except my wife and kids. Maybe they benefit a little bit. I was in ministry, so they didn't benefit financially. So it was more like they didn't get anything out of it. But what happens is when that starts to kind of drain off through some of the stuff we talk about, the de-shaming of some of that, and I started to get more in touch with healthy shame. I remember being in crisis going, this gasoline that has fueled so much of what I've accomplished in my life so far as my mid-40s when all this was happening, when I started this, I remember, what do I do without the fuel that has burned in this engine, which is I will be the hardest worker, or I'm not going to fail, or there's no way I'm not going to succeed because I'm committed to not being I'm working so much out of insecurity and the fear of the judgment and the contempt I already have for myself that I can't just be human.
Yeah.
And that being imperfect is not what's wrong with me.
That's right.
In fact, the admission of it may connect me to people that matter to me.
For sure.
I'm going to put both of you on the spot, if that's all right. First you, then you. Because I think it's easy for people to listen to our stories and think we've gone beyond toxic shame.
No.
And we're still in it.
Oh my gosh.
We're still in it. So for you, I want
right.
you to tell a story about even how Tin Man, let's go all the way back to the intensive, how Tin Man, because you said in your toxic shame, you did not want Tin Man to grow.
Yeah.
So tell the story, and then for you too. There's parts there's something that happened between you and I with your toxic shame.
I can tell you 20 things this last week. I can tell you, and now I'll tell that story you want me to, but I can just tell you one of the things that Brenda has had, my wife Brenda has had at 38 years married, but she's had to repeat to me more than any other time in our marriage. When she'll say something to me, when she says it and she sees my reaction, not my response, but my reaction, she'll look at me and say, "You're not in trouble." Because I'm so used to walking in a room thinking I'm already going to be in trouble. That's toxic shame.
Yeah.
And so I filter her comments through that filter, and so I read her that way. And then she'll a lot of times have to talk me off that cliff because I pull away from her in that moment, and then I go into my cocoon and I disappear. But one of the big stories for me, even again to the founding of Tin Man, I had come off a leadership situation where honestly, and this is healthy shame, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, we all have gifts we bring to the body. Healthy shame is I have something to bring and so do you, and together we all have more.
Yes.
And one of the things I have to bring is gifts around the area of leadership, encouragement, exhortation, like moving things forward in a direction. And for me, sometimes the way I think, the way I see things, the way I think we need to go, the way I intuitively make decisions, I always describe my leadership like a salmon swimming upstream. He can't draw the map, but man, he knows where the water is and he'll find where he was spawned. And I trust all those instincts. And it's probably one of the things I do, like breathing to me, it feels easy to me. So it looks so easy to me that some people won't even think I don't think about stuff because I come to conclusions so quickly sometimes, around this stuff. But anyway, but leading and intuitively knowing how to get somewhere has just been so natural for me that most of my life, I found myself in situations trying not to lead and then shaming myself when I walk out of a room and going, how did I end up in charge of all that? How did they end up looking at me for everything? Because I didn't want to lead. But anyway, I came off this situation where after I'd imploded and there was a huge, I can say this charitably now, I didn't say this for years, but there was a huge overreaction a little bit to my self-disclosure on some areas I'd been struggling with. And some of the overreaction was in the territory of my leadership. Okay, and I could pull that apart, but mostly it was like, and it was actually stated to me, you can never be trusted in leadership again. It was written on paper, read to my wife and I, basically death sentence. And if you know the story, it was from a self-disclosure, and it was a way over rotation. By the way, the people that said that to me 20 years ago, 5 years ago, apologize. There's been a huge healing around all those kind of statements. But I remember walking out of that going, I don't have to lead anything. I don't need to be up front on anything. And by the way, I'm gonna go quietly in the shadows, and if I can help guys, I will. And I don't care if people think I sell donuts. I'm just going to quietly just go off. I'm not going to lead an organization. I'm not going to lead a ministry. I won't lead a church. I won't lead a business. I'm just going to go off into the corner and help other people succeed. And I did that for years. And that's what Tin Man was. Tin Man was just me doing it. And this is where you come in the picture, because I remember, Todd, you confronted me because the snowball was rolling down a hill from the work I was doing and what people were getting out of it. And then other people were going, man, this is bigger than you. And I remember going, no, I don't want this to grow. I don't want to lead something again. And it wasn't because I'm not a leader. It was because I still had so much toxic shame around the statements made around my leadership and my fear to kind of, sort of stick my head up again and try to exercise those muscles. Even this podcast for me is a huge, huge step of faith for me. To even sit in front of cameras and a microphone and talk. Because I haven't done stuff like this for 20 years much. And but anyway, I remember you confronted me and you said, Jeff, I won't use the exact words because they would have to edit this out of we don't edit this podcast, so then it would ruin the whole podcast. But I remember you confronted me and basically said in different words, it's really ugly. I wish I could use your word. It's really ugly watching you try not to lead.
Yeah.
Like watching you try to get your 5 pounds of flour into a 1 pound sack. And it's not even who you are. And I remember you saying, maybe God wants to grow this. Maybe God wants to do something with it beyond you. And maybe you need to be open that this thing could be an umbrella that other guys like you could do this kind of work and other women could do it. And it could be more than that. I mean, that was the beginning of me kind of going, you confronted my toxic shame in a loving way to say, are you open to the vulnerability of believing that God could still use you in some of those ways that he used to use you, that you'd been so shamed around, and now you thought, not only will he never use me that way, but I'm not going to risk that again. I'm not going to risk that. Why would I ever risk opening myself up to what I went through the last time I did it? And man, I remember that. And I remember your confrontation. Tim, that wouldn't exist probably the way it is now if you hadn't confronted me to be open to stepping in to some healthier shame around how God might have made me for what this ministry could do.
Yeah,
I remember that.
So true.
You got a story for him?
Yeah, of course I do. I got lots.
Take his mic away.
But again, Phil, you're great. Even for us to say to you, your greatness around teaching, your greatness around you being able to take the concepts that are very, very, very difficult to understand, make them simplistic for people to wrap their heads and hearts around. That's my great sadness for you often is you don't understand your greatness. You really do not understand your greatness. And again, the confrontation for you was around your ability to teach, to write, and your unbelief in that. Your unbelief in that. And so I just think it's important for all of us to see a lot of times a toxic shame limits what the Lord can really do and what he wants to do, and how the fear of being abandoned. If I show up and be me, for you, if I show up and be me, I'm in trouble. If I show up and be me, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
If I show up and be me, no one's going to want to, I'll be too much for people. If I show up and be me, no one's going to want to read what I have to read. And it's like, oh man, even around, the early stages of the Emotions Unveiled, I remember talking to you, this has got to be literally 15 years ago. I was in grad school and you were talking, dreaming about that. And you would often say, it's not going to be any good. No one's going to do it. No one's going to want to do it. I'm like, oh man, come on, bro. This is going to be incredible. And now fast forward, and now the second edition's about to come out, and what you guys have produced, but yet your shame will limit what the Lord can have for us in that. And that's, for me, it's so sad to watch.
So let me ask you this. So are you gifted in those areas that he's describing?
I mean, some would say.
Watch this. So watch this. Here's what I say. So healthy shame lets a person step into how they're made.
That's right.
And it's not arrogant, grandiose, or egotistical, because God gave you those gifts.
Yes.
That's right.
What happens is, with my toxic shame, I actually play small to how God made me, and don't step into the vulnerability of being seen in some little way with however he made me, for the good of the whole body of Christ.
That's right.
Does that make sense?
That's right.
So go back to this, the very beginning on toxic shame, coming out of abandonment. It is the default conclusion a child comes to for any form of rejection or abandonment.
For sure.
That I have to make it make sense, because something's wrong here, that I'm not being loved for who I am. Something's wrong here, that who I am is not being embraced.
Yeah.
And by the way, we live in an imperfect world with imperfect families of origin, friends, cousins, aunts, uncles, moms, dads, siblings. I got a big sister that was dominant in my life. She's the one that I was walking into a room every time, and I was waiting to get my head handed to me. So she's the one that Brenda pays the price for when Brenda says to me, you're not in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, that was part of where I got all that, was through this dominant 10-year-old older sister that just was she's my late sister now. She came to know Christ near the end of her life. Great story and all that. But man, when I was a kid, my friends wouldn't even come to my house. Everyone was so afraid of my sister. I was terrified of her. But I go back to how much I oriented myself in that home to around protecting myself from that sister of mine. That I was too much for her. Does that make sense? So go back to this. It is the default conclusion to explain why they're not loving me this way.
Yes.
And why is it that a child can never say, why is it a default, Phil or Todd? Why can't a child say, what's wrong with you, Dad? That you can't sit here with me, or that I don't seem whatever it is. Yeah. Benign neglect, or flat out rejection and abandonment, because there's a whole spectrum of all that, and the brain interprets all of it the same. There's no big abandonment, little abandonment. In fact, in some ways, the worse it is, the easier it is to understand. We hear your story, we go, of course.
Right.
There's a whole lot of the people listening to this go, well, I didn't have any of that. And I go, I can tell you this, though. In some ways, your story was so good that you can't see. It's harder for you to see what happened to you, because that mom and dad wasn't perfect, which means you got some of their toxic shame.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk about that for a second.
There is an innate recognition that humans have. Todd said it first episode, actually, that or second episode, where he said, I did not know my dad, my birth dad, which is a way of saying I didn't know the human being on earth I'm most closely related to. We share DNA. We're both males. This is my template for me. Right? We can't see God. We feel him. We know him. We can't see him. I can see him. But Todd was stuck in this place of I can see him, but I can't see him because I don't have access to him. And so this innate, inborn recognition, without this person, without these people, I am not viable. And so a child will shame himself or herself because to shame them or to blame them means, they may go further away. And if they go completely away, I'm dead. It's what you said about the brain. The brain knows that, I can be dead without losing my physical life. And it doesn't know the difference between the two necessarily.
Yeah.
And so a child looks and goes, if these two people or single parent families, if this person goes away, I won't make it.
Yeah.
And so Todd's caught in this place of where if they go away, he goes away kind of, I won't make it. And so that innate default network is that inborn recognition that I am a needy creature, back to kind of where we started. And these are the people that meet my needs. And so I can't take the risk of saying something's wrong there, because if something's wrong there, I'm toast. So it's so much easier to go, there's something wrong here. If I can fix what's wrong here, they'll stay.
So it gives me actually an illusion of control and power.
Yes.
Because now at least I can do something about me. I can't do something about them. So if I'm the problem, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fix me.
That's right.
And I go to work, and now I'm on the treadmill. And man, that treadmill is hard to get off of. And then for me, then I come to know Christ. Someone tells me I don't have to be on a treadmill. I'm loved. I'm loved for who I am. He loves me in spite of even some of the things. In fact, in spite of all things. And yet somehow, in fact, there's whole books of the Bible written about this, where Paul says, you foolish Galatians, you finally experienced the grace of God. You don't have to perform to be loved. What is it about you that so quickly runs back to having to perform to be loved? And I go, well, I'll tell you why we go back there so quickly. Because it's all what happened to us very early on in any of our families.
Yes.
The survival was based upon performance in some way, or non-performance even.
Which is a great segue to, the next podcast is, codependency. So would you speak to that as we come to a close, Phil? Like how our toxic shame does drive us to what we would say manages relationship. But it is it's what you just alluded to.
It's right on. Just taking that topic, Jeff, and extending it, kind of going out in our diagram, which again is on our website for you to look at as we go out on that, carrying that burden. It's all up to me. If you want to scare a kid to death, look at him and go, hey, bud, it's all up to you. Hey, sweetheart, it's all up to you. That child will crack under that pressure. They'll work themselves to death first. And so that is so heavy to carry. It's like a boulder on the back, toxic shame. And all the messages of toxic shame is so heavy to carry, and I need relief. And so relief says, if I could just have a moment to where I'm not carrying all of this, then at least I could have a little breather, and codependency is what provides that. That's what's so intoxicating about it, is that it provides such relief of this message about me I've been carrying, and I get to take a little break. So just think about when your muscles are under strain or anything like that, when you finally get a break, they call it a breather. I can breathe, how good that feels. Well, codependency is like a shot in our veins of adrenaline, like, I have relief from being such a schmuck now. So it really does. This toxic shame conversation does lead to how codependency becomes intoxicating.
So to wrap up today, made in the image of God, so we started, made in the image of God. In a fallen world, we are rejected or abandoned in some way in a fallen world.
Yeah.
We have to make sense of that, and we most of the time make sense of that through the narrative about ourselves, the self-contempt of what's wrong with me.
That's right.
That's toxic shame.
Yeah.
Distinguished from healthy shame. It's toxic shame, which leads to this thing we're talking about in our next one called codependency, which is the outgrowth or the result of it's how we deal with our toxic shame. It's codependency.
Right. Yeah.
I would just say, as we come to an end, a way for you to, between now and the next episode, is take the word shame and write, should have already mastered everything, and make a list. What are the places in your life that you believe you should have mastered? Because it's out of that place of what you have not mastered, and what you're trying to master is the way to gain control and relief. But that's going to lead into your codependency.
Should have already mastered everything. And what's wrong with me that I haven't?
Which has embedded in it the two messages of toxic shame. I despise my humanness and how I label myself for that being true.
That's right.
I should have already mastered everything, and I haven't, so I am blank.
That's right.
Be a great assignment. Great intuitive assignment.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Hope you'll hit us up next time, 10man.org. Thanks for being here.
Thanks again for joining us on Return to Heart. To access resources mentioned on this program or to find out more about Tin Man Ministries, please go to tinman.org.